Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the midweek edition of 21 Wire Live, or the Midweek Wire, as we like to call it. Thank you for joining us. We're going to have a really interesting discussion today. There's a lot of interesting developments on the political front, but there's been a lot of attention with the debate on the Joe Rogan show last week, where Douglas Murray, who's I guess you can call him a conservative pundit, had a public meltdown in his debate with Dave Smith, and massive, disaster for Douglas Murray. And Dave Smith came out pretty well, and Joe Rogan's been trying to kind of smooth things over with all his A-list guests like Jordan Peterson and so forth. And it's brought up a lot of interesting questions. And again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. Thanks for joining us. We're going to get into this interesting discussion. There's a lot of different angles to this, and to help us navigate this one, I think I can't find anybody better really to discuss something like this than the political editor of the Pulse.today, Basil Valentine's, joining us on the live link right now. Basil, thanks for joining us this week.
My pleasure, Patrick. Great to be with you, and hello to everyone watching and listening.
So, just for starters on this, I got a clip that we'll play as well in a moment. But it's kind of an interesting discussion that's come up at a very heady time. It's got a geopolitical angle to it as well. It really kicked off last week on the Joe Rogan show. You probably saw this Douglas Murray, Dave Smith debate that Joe Rogan was kind of refereeing in a neutral way. I think probably one of his better programs that I've seen, because it really kind of showed something, didn't it? Douglas Murray didn't come out very well out of it, even though he probably sold a lot of books off the back of it. We'll talk about that in a moment. But did you get a chance to see that? We'll take a look at the clip. So I want to get your thoughts on this general topic. Just to start with, Basil, go ahead.
I haven't watched all of it. I can't bear to watch Douglas Murray. It's as simple as that. It brings me out in hives. So I don't want to devote any more of my attention to him than is absolutely necessary. Dave Smith did a reasonable job of pointing out Murray's fundamental inhumanity. I mean, apart from anything else, he claims to be this great defender of Western civilization, but at the same time is quite happy to see the entire Christian community of Gaza completely eviscerated, because, of course, he is a 100% owned property and puppet of the Zionist regime. He was given some sort of special propaganda award by the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, only a couple of weeks ago. He really is their most prized possession. He comes across as a sort of deeply submissive individual. We know that he's a homosexual and he's married to a Jewish man. And he obviously craves approval from people who he feels are his superiors. In this case, Zionist Jewish people. There's also film of him doing the rounds saying that Jewish lives aren't worth more than Christian lives. That was from a year or two ago. And that if Israel falls, Western civilization falls, all the rest of it. I mean, he's unhinged, as well as being a deeply unpleasant individual. And that's why I don't want to give him any more credence or attention than he already gets. He's someone who really doesn't have any place in public life because his positions are idiotic, extreme, and thoroughly nasty all at the same time. He was quoted as saying that nobody should talk about a country that they haven't been to. And his hypocrisy on that was shown up on the Rogan program. Rogan has been mocking him on subsequent programs ever since. And Dave Smith, well, as I say, he did an okay job, but he didn't really press home the point that Murray is a full-throated endorser of genocide and the mass murder and mutilation of children. And he really needs to be nailed down on that point.
Yeah, I thought that was a bit of a missed opportunity on Dave Smith's part. It's hard to criticize people after the fact when there's just so much so much stuff flying around in terms of discussions. But that is kind of the point, though, is that there are certain people, Basil, we'll call them gatekeepers. And these are people that are dotted around positions of the media. The bigger platform, the bigger the gatekeeper, usually. Douglas Murray is more than a gatekeeper. He's sort of a paid asset, really.
Yeah.
I think he was associate director of the Henry Jackson Society, which is a sort of rabid pro-war, pro-Zionist think tank, you want to use, for lack of a better term, based in the United States. And obviously a regular pundit on Fox and some of these networks that are very pro-war. He's a neocon as well. In fact, here's one of his books, Basil. This is a Neoconservatism: Why We Need It. This is in 2006. So he was right on the pro-war gravy train, right there at the height of the whole Iraq war debacle. Obviously, so no lessons learned there, and he's basically again, I think this is probably from his Henry Jackson days, but railing against great society liberalism and venerating Reagan and sort of building his neocon bona fides. And this is his latest book. This got a boost from Donald Trump, actually. It's called On Democracies and Death Cults: Israel, Hamas, and the Future of the West. And he's decrying the toppling of Western civilization because of radical Islam. It's a bit rich. So, I mean, death cults. So, he said you have to experience them to be able to comment on them. So I guess he has a lot of experience in death cults, Basil, because he's written a whole book on it. But the question is, which death cult does he have experience with? This is a valid question, isn't it?
Well, of course, a lot of people are saying that Zionism is a death cult and the Israeli regime is a death cult, and we don't know how many people they've killed in Gaza. Conservative estimates are around 50,000, but other estimates place it somewhere north of 200,000 people. So, and what's more, the Israelis have been murdering people very deliberately, women and children, who pose no threat to the Israeli state other than their voice. I want to highlight, for example, Fatima Hassouna. Her and her entire family were murdered immediately after the film that she appears in was announced as having been selected for screening at the Cannes Film Festival. The film Put Your Hand on Your Soul and Walk. It's an Iranian film. And obviously the Israelis took exception to the fact that she and her film were going to be screened at Cannes. So they murdered her and her entire family immediately afterwards with pinpoint accuracy. Now, that, to me, is the action of a death cult. Simple as that. So I'm not quite sure what Douglas Murray is talking about here. He deliberately as well takes the Israeli position that the war, rather the mass slaughter in Gaza, is somehow symbolic of Western democracies and so-called Judeo-Christian values, although they don't exist, and that's another point. That somehow the slaughter in Gaza, the requirement to exterminate the entire population of Gaza, is driven by a holy war, if you like, of Christians and Jews against Muslims, and that if they don't beat the Muslim fundamentalists in Gaza, then we will be overrun by them in Europe, and Europe will become a caliphate. Now, that's sort of very deliberately misleading, because, of course, the Palestinian struggle is for, well, right now, it's simply for existence, for life itself, but is, of course, for human rights, for land, for self-sovereignty, for freedom. It isn't a religious struggle as such, and it's deliberately disingenuous to misrepresent it as such. But Murray's bought all that hook, line, and sinker. He also seems to believe in something called Judeo-Christian values. Well, the whole point of the mission of Jesus Christ was to update Judeo values and to accentuate the requirement to love thy neighbor as oneself, forgiveness, compassion. These are the central tenets of Christianity. But the regime in Tel Aviv have made it very clear, I mean, every day, that they have no truck with that philosophy, with that spiritual message at all, and that they are hell-bent on exacting revenge and eliminating their enemies in their entirety. You know, Netanyahu talked about Amalek, extraordinary reference, really, to thousands of year old biblical enemy, supposedly, of the Jewish people, and that they must be eliminated right down to the last baby and the last goat and everything else. So, but Murray doesn't want to ever face that. As I say, I personally think he's a deeply submissive individual. There's a big kink in him somewhere, and he wants approval from people that he sees as his superiors. It's as simple as that. Getting a pat on the head from Isaac Herzog, there, well done, good boy. Keep going. That's the ultimate turn on for him.
Well, it wasn't taking the analysis a little bit further than maybe. We could go there a bit later, but just to get back to the point here, and we'll start with this idea, because I think it's actually a fascinating idea. Talking point is that you can't comment on something unless you've had direct experience with it. In other words, you can't possibly comment on a country unless you've at least been there. Even comment in passing is, impolite or untoward unless you've actually been to that country. So he's waxed on about Iran, and I don't think he's ever been to Iran, but he's bloviated for days and hours on that topic, obviously. But, it's kind of a ridiculous argument if you think about it, because a lot of people write books. There's people who do dissertations on places, or historical dissertations on countries they've never been to, Basil. So where's Murray going with this argument?
Well, nowhere. And that's just why I don't really pay any attention to him. He's an idiot. He's someone who has been promoted by corporate media, much the same way that a lot of politicians are promoted by corporate media, way beyond their intellect or their ability. And of course, they get caught out like this periodically. This is just one example of him making a fool of himself, but there are plenty of others as well.
We'll play this clip. This is an interesting mashup. We played this on previous shows, but it's obviously worth looking at. This is, I guess, Douglas Murray versus Douglas Murray. I think that's the best way to describe it. Here he goes.
Have you been to the crossing points?
I really resent that form of argumentation.
When were you last there at all?
Sure. I really resent it.
You should at least do the courtesy of visiting it.
This is not an attractive invitation.
I think it's a good idea to see stuff, particularly if you spend a career talking about something.
I have the right to talk about whatever the hell I want, and no one's going to stop me or try to intimidate me. And I think that if I said to somebody else the other way around, it would be equally reprehensible.
I have a journalistic rule of trying never to talk about a country even in passing unless I've at least been there.
If I said, shut up, you have no right to criticize anything that Douglas Murray says because...
Hang on, you're talking about crossing points. And not only have you never been to a crossing point in either Egypt or in Israel, but you've never even been to the region.
Okay. It's not an exact comparison, but seriously, is that a reasonable form of argument? No. In that case, nobody can talk about anything. We might as well pack up, go home, and isolate ourselves.
If you're insisting that you're an expert of some kind, or not claiming you're an expert, but still talking about it, if you've never seen any of this going on.
I mean, there are some people who've written about there are people who've written about the Holocaust who didn't experience the Holocaust and have written about it better than people who did.
But that is a different matter from spending an awfully long amount of time talking about an issue in a region you haven't even had the courtesy to visit, whilst developing all of these views about it.
This idea that the lived experience has to triumph over everything else is not always correct.
should at least know what it is, what the territory is, what the situation is in the region.
So there's an irony to this, but let's skate over the irony.
Goodness me, Basil! He couldn't have hoisted himself any better than he did there. But that's just sort of the opening gambit.
Well, he's not very bright, Patrick, and he's also completely unprincipled. So this is what happens to sort of people.
So with the argument that he's making, and that you have all these characters that I guess the sort of the fight against the woke, okay, this the gender pronouns thing, this whole controversy and this whole sort of event, if you will, politically, which kind of sprung up in a way 2015, 2016. Out of this came Ben Shapiro, raised his profile. Jordan Peterson was produced from this for supposedly, I mean, the claim from Jordan Peterson is that he was going to be arrested if he used the wrong pronouns. I don't think that was true. But anyway, from that, he became this sort of champion of free speech. And then you had people like Douglas Murray kind of, going in there and drafting off of this issue as well. And Dave Rubin, who else? Konstantin Kisin, this UK podcaster. And all these guys kind of, moved into that lane and became these sort of fighters for freedom, if you will. And then on the COVID issue, a lot of these guys didn't say anything about COVID. If they did, they waited a year and a half. That includes Joe Rogan, Russell Brand as well, all these sort of people. But then I guess when it became quite fashionable to oppose lockdowns and claim it was authoritarian, then some of them did. But really it was about the woke and the pronouns. So they're after October 7th, they've tried to create this, and Peterson obviously came to the rescue of his cohort, Douglas Murray, because they're all sort of on the same team. And so they claim that those people on the right who oppose Israel or who are taking the Palestinian side, or I guess they're looking for low-hanging fruit, like people who are obsessed with Jewish global conspiracies and things like that. But so they've used this term woke right. But the reality is, after October 7th, the right, the Zionist right, we use this term woke right after October 7th, and it sort of got hijacked by the Douglas Murrays or by these sort of Konstantin Kisins, these sort of Jordan Peterson. James Lindsay is this other sort of, again, sort of house intellectual of the right who again claims it's, paranoid anti-Jewish people on the right. That's the woke right. But if you think about it, the original anti-woke thing was about railing against radical identity politics and cancel culture on the radical left. They was trying to shut down campus free speech. Well, who's trying to shut down campus speech now? Who's using the organs of the state now to shut down First Amendment protected political speech by students in America, but the quote conservative pro-Zionist right? And I argue, Basil, these are the woke right. This is what the real woke right is.
Yeah, it's sort of this term woke has become completely meaningless. I wouldn't say they're woke right, they're Zionist right, as simple as that. The irony is very deep. J.D. Vance, trade talks with the UK, has said that a trade deal favourable to Britain might depend on us reforming some of our so-called hate speech laws. That freedom of speech, very, very important issue to Vance, apparently. And it's really vital that Britain is, at the forefront of upholding our centuries-old tradition of freedom of speech, in order to please the Americans. But at the same time, as you say, quite the opposite is happening with regards to the one issue of Israel and the Gaza Holocaust, where, Trump has been, for all that Joe Biden financed the Holocaust, approved it every step of the way, right the way through his presidency, purporting sometimes to offer some resistance, but not doing so in any meaningful way, but didn't start arresting people who were critics of Israel in the way that Trump is. Now, Trump obviously came to power with, entering with trumpets and the fantastic ceasefire deal, and everybody sighed a breath of relief, at that, not least the people of Gaza, of course. But within a few weeks, Netanyahu, in order to appease the exterminationist elements in his own cabinet and for his own political survival, he detonated that deal. And the slaughter has intensified in its barbarity, if anything, since. I mean, we've seen pictures of disabled special needs children being burnt alive in a tent, and this is what the Jordan Petersons of this world and the Douglas Murrays and all the other people you mentioned endorse. Unfortunately, they don't come on programs like this where we can confront them directly and ask them, is there anything at all that the Israeli regime could do in terms of torturing people, burning them alive, any sort of hellish torment that would bring a word of condemnation or pushback from you? But, they're cowards. They wouldn't talk to people like us on air. So, it's the Israel exception. It's the Israel exception to international law. It's the Israel exception to freedom of speech. And as the barbarity and cruelty has intensified in Gaza to this very day, they've now just today been blowing up the few bulldozers that came in during the ceasefire needed to clear the rubble and find some of the human remains under the rubble. A lot of that's been destroyed today, together with a few dozen Palestinians, but that's par for the course, isn't it? As the barbarity of the assault has intensified, so has the crackdown on dissent on both sides of the Atlantic. The British Palestinian professor, Dr. Makram Khoury Mashul, was detained at Heathrow for over 4 hours and questioned at some nonsense about terrorism. Again, the so-called Terrorism Act is being extensively misused by the UK authorities. And of course, we know it's even worse in the United States. Unless you are a US citizen and therefore have your First Amendment rights, it looks like you could be deported for saying anything at all that the Trump administration don't like. So we hoped for better from Trump, didn't we, Patrick? We were duped again, perhaps. I think that $100 million donation from Miriam Adelson should have made it absolutely clear what was going to happen.
$230 million for Trump from the lobby, and the lobby spent on all Republican and Democrat elections $600 million in the last election cycle, including the president. So a lot of spondoolies, $600 million. So that'll buy you some influence and some leverage. So you're talking about in the U.S. here, this is the Mahmoud Khalil case. And this is going to federal court, by the way. There's still an outstanding habeas corpus hearing that's due on this. And so I think this is going to probably go to the Supreme Court. I think he's probably I would think he's going to win just on the basis of this is a straight up clear First Amendment case. There's the crazy judge from Louisiana. I forgot her name, Jamie Comins, I think. But I mean, how they're treating this one, and this is not the hill you want to die on if you're a conservative. Not on the First Amendment. It's not a good hill to die on. And again, it's no evidence. Again, here's constitutional lawyer Janine Eunice tweeted this out last week here after the judge on Khalil's case ordered the government to provide evidence to justify deporting him. This is what they filed. She says, I've been a lawyer for 14 years and a criminal defense lawyer for 9. I've never seen anything like this. Nothing there. A big empty sort of evidence.
Well, basically the claim by Marco Rubio, who may as well be in the Israeli cabinet, effectively. I mean, this is the thing. I've even seen, liberal commentators like Kyle Kulinski, now admitting that the US administration is, to all intents and purposes, owned by what is the most right-wing Israeli government in history. I mean, we're miles away from where we were in the Rabin era, for example, for all that the Oslo Accords were deeply flawed and all the rest of it. The Israeli society certainly appeared to be slightly more sane at that point, and the Israeli government was not in the hands of factions who are open about their desire to completely exterminate the Palestinian people and their entire identity, culture, and everything else. And yet, you would think that, well, if the United States policy stays where it is, Israel moves irredeemably to the fascist exterminationist right, then that would cause some friction with the US, which has had a two-state solution policy going back decades, at least paying lip service to it. But the lobby have been so successful in taking over the US administration that even this openly genocidal regime is warmly embraced, welcomed. There's no meaningful pushback of any kind that we can see with regard to Gaza. I mean, of course, there are noises that Trump has already vetoed a strike on Iran, but we don't know that for certain. And that very much hinges on the result of the talks with the Iranians. And of course, quite understandably, having come to an agreement with the Obama administration, which Trump then ripped up as soon as he got into office, it appears that the Israelis are dictating terms to the US to dictate to Iran, and want a so-called agreement that the Iranians could never surrender to. All the while, of course, claiming, I mean, a sort of bizarre clip of an Israeli spokesperson saying, "Oh, the reason why we should have nuclear weapons and the Iranians can't is because we don't pose a threat to any of our neighbors." I mean, it's just off the charts stuff, isn't it? It's insanity. I mean, it would be hilarious if it were not so sinister, Patrick.
Yeah, and that's important geopolitical context you're giving there, Basil. It just shows the backdrop of what's happening behind this media conversation that we're picking apart. Here's Jordan Peterson here, and what was interesting is after Douglas Murray had this public meltdown, I mean, he really came out badly on this. It was really embarrassing. Dave Smith kind of showed him up to be kind of a pompous, arrogant, pseudo-intellectual, a very major gatekeeper, especially for the state of Israel. I'd show you pictures of Douglas Murray with Netanyahu, but there's a whole range of Christmas cards he has out of him and Netanyahu, so I don't want to bore you with that. We have other things to show you. But Peterson then ran to Joe Rogan, knowing that Douglas Murray and this woke right, Zionist right kind of conclave was hemorrhaging support. I mean, they're just getting torn to pieces. And again, I've been a big critic of Joe Rogan and sort of milquetoast interviews, but I have to hand it to him. He was very good of him to put these two people together, and I give him props for that. And he actually mediated it very well. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to mediate that. So I give Joe Rogan total credit for this. Probably, to me, one of the best things he's done. But Peterson's become kind of a clownish character. He's become a parody of himself, wearing these really ridiculous suits. I mean, any self-respecting person who's making 20 or 30, I think 30 or 50 million a year, whatever he earns, with a top Hollywood talent agency, by the way. He's an A-list commodity. He's not alternative, okay? He wears the most ridiculous looking suits that are just no self-respecting person. It's like a character out of Batman or something. There's Jekyll and Hyde. I don't know if you've seen some of these the get-ups that he is wearing. I don't know who's doing his wardrobe, but he's becoming a sort of a pastiche of himself. But so he's gone on here to give this kind of Nazi argument that he's accusing the opposition, people opposing him, of having psychological problems. He's saying that the only psychopaths are opposing his and Douglas Murray's political viewpoints or criticizing Israel, that there's this psychopathic problem on the right. Here he is on Rogan doing this kind of attempted rescue job after Douglas Murray just absolutely tanked it publicly. But listen to this.
I think that virtualization has enabled the psychopaths.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, well,
without a doubt.
That's a terrible thing, because the psychopathic types, they're always the death of everything. Like I'm seeing this come up on the right now. So imagine this. I've been working on a new theory of political psychopathology, and I like it quite a lot.
Is this where the term the woke right comes in?
Yeah. Well, Lindsay is pointing at that, but he hasn't got the diagnosis exactly right. So it isn't woke. That's not the issue. It's not exactly.
I think
one
what
level
they're talking about is like similar types of behavior.
He is talking about that. Yeah, no. What he's pointing.
Woke just lets you clarify in your head. Oh, it's like that.
Yeah, but the problem is,
it's like Antifa.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is that argument is predicated on the claim that the ideas are the problem, like the woke ideas, for example, on the right or the left. But that's not the problem.
I have to pause it here. I mean,
well, so far he's spoken for a minute and said absolutely nothing at all.
The sophistry from these people is just unbelievable. Jordan Peterson's like a 5-year-old who's tied his shoelaces together. He's tripping all over the place on his own sort of bloviating, kind of, I don't know, just like stovepiping this conversation with all sorts of language, I've got a new political theory on this, and he's citing my
theory of psychopathology, but he hasn't told us what it is yet. You know?
The problem with Jordan Peterson is he is very good at his area of expertise. And let's be honest, what Jordan Peterson is an expert on is the mating habits of lobsters and the personality traits of lobsters, and applying that to human beings. Applied behavioral psychology, whatever. That's what he does. That's his clinical practice. When he wades into politics and geopolitics, he is an absolute disaster. This guy has really he's destroying himself. And then when you see things like this, Basil, this is from his Instagram account, Jordan Peterson with Benjamin Netanyahu and his handler, Jordan's handler, Ben Shapiro from the Daily Wire. That's who Jordan works for, gets his pockets, whatever, 10, 20, 30 million. Nobody knows exactly how much he makes a year, but he is absolutely a captured creature for the Daily Wire. And there he is with Netanyahu. So he can't possibly claim objectivity. This is a wanted war criminal he's having dinner with. This is a country that's in the dock at the ICJ for a genocide. And so he is they've co-opted Jordan Peterson because he was a soft touch, and they wanted to capture the demographic, which is disaffected beta males between the age of 25 and 45 or something like that. It's a sort of certain demographic that Peterson speaks to, especially why people were in lockdown and COVID, watching too many YouTube videos. But let's not digress too much. Let me just play the rest of this, and we'll get your comment.
The problem is that 4 to 5% of the population, something like that, is cluster B. That's the DSM-5 terms: histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, psychopathic, or they have dark tetrad traits. They're Machiavellian. They're sadistic. That's about 4%. Okay, so the question is, how do these people maneuver? And the answer is they go to where the power is, and they adopt those ideas, and they put themselves even on the forefront of that. Right. But the ideas are completely irrelevant.
Right.
All they're doing is they're the Pharisees. They're the modern version of the Pharisees. They're the people who use God's name in vain.
That's anti-Semitic, isn't it?
This guy's too much. He's so much. I mean, if you had to break down, do a play-by-play of, and just stop him, every second is a treasure trove of hypocrisy and just self-contradictions. And I don't think he knows what he's talking about. He's too much. This is a guy who made his career talking, and he's talked himself out of the game. And now he's just like, I don't know what he's pontificating about these days, but he's just like making stuff up, trying to sound intelligent. And Jordan Peterson's strategy is to use as many kind of complex words and sentences and just kind of slam them together. And then hopefully people will sit back and say, wow, that was really deep. That was really profound, Jordan. You are the internet's greatest philosopher. Thank you for straightening my life out. And I make my bed every morning because of you, Jordan. So what he's doing here is basically describing himself.
Exactly.
First of all, he's describing Douglas Murray, Ben Shapiro, and all of these multi-million-dollar elite gatekeepers that are basically bankrolled by the Zionist propaganda machine and mainstream media, and also Hollywood and all these same sort of talent agencies and so forth. That's basically what he's. It's like you said, Basil. Every accusation is a confession. So he's continues to dig himself deeper into this hole. He'll finish himself off on this one. Watch.
Proclaim moral virtue.
Yes.
Doesn't matter whether it's right or left or Christian or Jewish or Islam. They invade the idea space, and then they use those ideas as false weapons to advance their narcissistic advantage.
Yes.
And so then you have the problem, and the right's going to face this more and more, particularly because the left had to face it when they were in powers.
Yes.
How do you identify the psychopathic parasites, 4% of the population, who are clothed in your clothing and waving your flags, but who are only in it for narcissistic benefit?
Well, I'm not clothed in Jordan's clothing. Thank God for that. He's got the worst dress sense probably in the in the Western Hemisphere. But so he's basically talking about him and his cohort. He's talking about his Zionist woke right cohort, the weaponization of anti-Semitism as a epithet to shut down free speech, to attack anybody who is criticizing the policies and actions of the state of Israel, who are in the dock at the International Courts of Justice for genocide. And that's deemed to be, quote, anti-Semitic. And they're using this device to shut down constitutionally protected speech in the United States. And they're begging the state to do it for them, which is the incredible thing, because that's what they accused the so-called radical left of doing for years, who didn't quite pull it off, but they're actually pulling it off here, the Zionist woke right, of which Douglas Murray, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Konstantin Kisin, all of these guys, influencers, they're not influencers, they're gatekeepers. And they've got the power of government behind them. I want to talk about the UK, but what was done to the Labour Party, Basil, and the ousting of Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn and all of his allies to purge a whole political party of anybody who had certain foreign policy views, that actually happened. So we're talking about a major, major political, transatlantic, international political operation to not just quell free speech, but also to transform how states are forming their foreign policies vis-a-vis the Middle East. I mean, am I exaggerating the situation here, Basil?
No, not at all. I mean, I think you might be exaggerating the influence of people like Douglas Murray and, to a lesser extent, Jordan Peterson. The other two, I don't really know. I don't pay any attention to them. And I think those two, Murray and Peterson, are on the wane. I think, more and more people are seeing through their BS. It's as simple as that. As for the purging of the Labour Party of the vast majority of its pro-Palestinian human rights voices, I mean, it's worth remembering that all that went on long before October the 7th, where Corbyn himself, obviously a lifelong supporter of Palestinian human rights, and dozens of other people in council seats, MPs, activists, you name it, were all purged as the result of a smear campaign that was orchestrated in Tel Aviv and then endorsed by The Guardian and the BBC. I mean, there's a big row going on under the surface at the moment between Owen Jones, on the one hand, who participated in the purge of anti-Zionists from the Labour Party, although, as I say, at that time, there were less anti-Zionists than simply supporters of Palestinian human rights. It's only since October the 7th that a lot more people have felt empowered to say, forget the two-state solution, has to be one state with equal rights for all. Until the last few months, a lot of people were still bleating out the other mantra, But even that, of course, was too much for the Likud, who, through their embassy and their agents and organizations like the so-called Community Securities Trust and the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, through these Israeli front groups, successfully smeared Jeremy Corbyn. And then, of course, the witch hunt went on, whereby you could be expelled from the Labour Party simply for saying that there wasn't an anti-Semitism crisis in the Labour Party, regardless of any evidence. Just if you said, oh, actually, no, I think this is all smears, that got you kicked out, So it ended up in a really, really bizarre, dark place. And of course, we can see the result now, because you've got David Lammy welcoming Israeli ministers, lying about it, promising that they won't be, or rather, the BBC lied about it, and then promising that he won't be arrested and all this sort of thing, And of course, an active accomplice to genocide with the weapons parts for the F-35 bombers and the surveillance flights over Gaza, both of which continue to this day. This is the thing, that it seems we've reached a point now where, there's a Holocaust happening, there's a mass slaughter, children burnt alive every day in tents, having already been displaced 10 times, children just saying they wish they could die, screaming in agony and pain and weeping at the endless noise of the drones and the fighters, never knowing when they're going to die, hoping they die. And this is all normal. This is fine. Kate Johnston, the Australian journalist, said, Israel has a right to defend itself is a euphemism for genocide. And of course, that is what it has become. You might have said on October the 8th, well, Israel has a right to defend itself and go after the Hamas terrorists, but it's very obvious, and the innumerable testimonies from medics and, of course, the few journalists that they haven't murdered, that Israel's been deliberately targeting civilians, women and children, journalists, medics, there are medics currently being tortured, so on and so forth. But we never see in the corporate media the, members of the government being put on the spot about this. Of course, if we'd had a Labour government under a Corbyn leadership, it would have been very, very different. Though, of course, they might have bumped him off. He was physically assassinated, but if he'd made it into number 10, well, it would have caused big ructions with the ultra-Zionist United States administration and, of course, the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen. Apparently, the European Commission came out with a statement last week saying that what Israel has done in Gaza goes beyond self-defense. At this point,
Yeah, if Corbyn came in, there'd probably be an attempted coup, like they tried with James Callaghan in '68, with the Mountbatten coup that didn't actually get pulled off, but it was in motion. They moved pretty far. Yeah.
That's right, and it was Jim. It was Harold Wilson actually, in 1976.
Oh, sorry, Harold Wilson. My bad.
And Wilson was a Zionist, so that was just simply because they didn't like the cut of his jib, and they thought he was a bit too close to Moscow and things like that. He was just a bit too much of a socialist all round for the establishment. But they calmed down when Labour started bringing the rate of inflation down, which had been skyrocketing as a result of the so-called Barber boom, Anthony Barber, the Chancellor of the Exchequer under the Ted Heath government. But that's another matter altogether. To bring us fully up to date, the BBC has today announced that it's deplatforming the former ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford, from the hustings in the Runcorn by-election. I don't know if you saw that, Patrick.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, he was due to speak at an event the BBC were covering, and they've decided he's been disinvited. He's the only local candidate.
Workers' Party for Britain,
and
right?
The Workers' Party of Britain, and of course, only about 25 miles east of Runcorn in Rochdale, George Galloway won the by-election there in February of last year. So you couldn't say that Peter Ford didn't stand a chance of winning the Runcorn by-election. There's a much smaller Muslim population in Runcorn, but nevertheless, that's not the only issue. Far from it. Peter Ford is putting in front of the electorate lots of other extremely popular policies, which of course were ditched by Starmer as soon as he became first leader of the opposition and then prime minister, because he's a compulsive liar and was elected on a whole series of false promises.
I want to show you this as well. I mean, this is also we've been sent so much stuff on this topic, but in terms of narratives, this is from honestly, I didn't know who this person was. His name's Joel Berry. Turns out he is the editor of the Babylon Bee, managing editor, and supposedly a best-selling author of Postmodern Pilgrim's Progress, U.S. Marine Corvette, Grumpy Dad, blah, blah, blah. So the Babylon Bee sells itself as a satirical website or that pokes fun at the left, and they're supposedly Christian, but they're rabidly pro-Zionist and very anti-Muslim, okay? Very anti-Muslim. That's how I would describe them. They would probably disagree, but they did crack a lot of jokes at the expense of the Lebanese and the Palestinians over the last year and a half regarding everything from carpet bombing to pagers. So so he's saying, he's just tweeted this out, Basil, here. He says, I think the U.S. has an interest in spending a little bit of money to defend the Holy Land and the birthplace of the Christian faith from bloodthirsty Islamic invaders. So that's the managing editor of the Babylon Bee. So talk about woke right. This is taking things to another level here. Obviously, I made a reply to this here, Basil.
I'd like to hear your reply, Patrick. Please read it out.
I will. I said, yours is a nonsensical, distorted crusader argument, as Israel has been using your sacred U.S. bombs and bullets to slaughter Christians and bomb historic Christian churches and holy sites in historic Palestine. There are no, quote, Islamic invaders in the Middle East. They live there. Other than, of course, the Al-Qaeda, HTS, ISIS hordes who invaded Syria, armed and funded, supported by the U.S., NATO, and Israel. Fact. Perhaps you're confusing yourself with the European Zionist invaders and subsequent American military invaders. I mean, it's hard to stress how completely wrong his take is. And maybe he's just making his joke, but it's a dead serious comment that this guy's making.
Is he not being ironic? I mean, that's the only possible interpretation. Christian worshippers were assaulted in Jerusalem at Easter, and indeed the papal legate was prevented from attending a church service as well. The Israelis put up barriers. At the Holy Church of the Sepultura in Bethlehem. Of course. The Christian worshippers, of course, were assaulted by the Israelis, by Jewish people. And indeed, it was the Israeli authorities that would not allow the Catholic prelate to attend the service. So he's got it completely inverted. But then again, the blindness of the so-called Christian conservative Zionists to Israel's persecution of Christians in Lebanon. They destroyed churches there as well, of course. In Gaza, worth just mentioning en passant, the late Pope's constant communication with the Catholic Church in Gaza. He spoke to them every day. It's to be hoped that the next Pope is similarly minded on that score. I've seen something about one leading candidate for cardinal being a Zionist, so obviously we hope that doesn't come to pass. Christian Zionism is a contradiction in terms to start with, and these people just don't seem to be able to see it. I mean, this is, again, when you go back to Douglas Murray, I don't want to mention him again because he's not worth it, but,
Oh, you mean that? You mean this Douglas Murray? This is with Rabbi Shmuley Boteach. There he is. Very attractive rabbi there, and the dashing Englishman, Douglas Murray there. That would make a nice Christmas card as well. I think you can find a camper picture than that one right there, Basil. What do you think?
I'm looking at my notes because having glossed the picture, I'm going to throw up if I have a look at it.
Yeah.
But if you've got the picture of the destroyed church in...
well, I'm glad you brought that up because this is a direct segue from what Joel Berry is making his Crusader argument, which is a little bit antiquated. I'd say about 600 years off. But this is what are we looking at here, Basil?
Well, that's, as it says, the Church of St. Porphyrius in Gaza, which had stood there for 1,000 years, one of the oldest churches in the world. And, of course, was very deliberately targeted and reduced to rubble by the Israelis, who, a lot of them hate Christianity. I mean, people don't like saying this, but, particularly... I'm not saying all Jews hate Christianity, but there's certainly a very active, powerful phalanx within the Israeli establishment that seem to target Christians, Christian places of worship, and want to eliminate Christianity from Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, anywhere else they can, frankly. And this is something that the Patriarch, the Armenian priest, the Armenian quarter in Jerusalem, they face constant eviction and harassment by Jewish settlers. Christian places of worship have been broken into, statues smashed, and they're vandalized, basically, so by fundamentalist Talmud followers. So, but this is something that Murray just doesn't. People like Murray just don't want to look at it.
Yeah,
but that's because he's not actually an intellectual in any meaningful sense of the term. He's an asset, he's a polemic, and he's a total jerk.
You're being way, way too kind, according to some people's liking. But what you're showing us here, Basil, these are holy sites in the Holy Land. In fact, Justin Amash, member of the Freedom Caucus from, I believe, Michigan. I think he's independent now, but he was Republican, I think. He had people he knew or very close, if not family members or extended family, who took shelter in one of these churches. And while they were taking shelter, I think this is early on when Israel started its scorched earth of Gaza, killed all these people taking shelter in a Christian church. Absolutely no comeback from this, obviously. Not a word from the Christian right or the Babylon Bee or Joel Berry. They had nothing to say about this. It's almost like you can't criticize the worst, most egregious, malicious war crimes. You can't say anything. Why?
Well, because Christian Zionism is so perverted that its adherents certainly appear to prioritize the state of Israel over Christ and his message and fellow Christians and the fundamental tenets of Christianity of love, forgiveness, compassion, treating your neighbor as yourself. Their minds are so warped that they actually worship the state of Israel. I mean, even though it has nothing whatsoever to do with historic Israel or anything like that, even though the whole point of the new covenant, particularly relevant, we mentioned this in Easter week, was that thy people Israel and the chosen people after the crucifixion and the resurrection are now the followers of Christ, not those who rejected him. That's absolutely central to the doctrine of atonement and what the New Testament message is all about. You could argue that it's the single most important aspect of New Testament theology, but the so-called Scofield Bible and years of brainwashing mean that Christian Zionists worship the Zionist state. They don't worship Christ. They don't revere him. His message comes a very poor second to the actions, intentions, and indeed the very existence and ideology of the State of Israel.
So politics above principles, politics above religious principles, and I'll say, Basil, I'll weigh in here. The Catholic Church isn't a lot better on this front. The Catholic Church used to not recognize the political argument of Zionism. They recognized, the Jewish people or whatnot in Israel, but they didn't, approve of the occupation until 1993. And if we go back further to Vatican II and a lot of the types of Old Testament translations that the Catholic Church allowed in are vastly different than say the King James translation of the Bible, and going back even further. So the politics of Zionism crept in and taken over the Catholic Church as it pertains to the readings, the gospel, and so forth. And so again, it's even in the intercessions during Easter, Basil, I can tell you, not a mention of Palestine, not a mention of Gaza. They did mention Ukraine and Russia, okay? And I went to a major parish in England. They mentioned Ukraine and Russia, and then they said, and the trauma in the Middle East. So it didn't even get a mention properly. And this is in the Holy Land. And so I think that's the argument you're making here, is that Christianity in the West has been hijacked by politics and big money and huge influence at the highest level politically. I think that's kind of what you're saying, Basil, and it's kind of hard to argue that that's not the case. That's exactly what's happened. And unfortunately, the person that's going to suffer the most. To bring the Pope Francis into this, who recently passed away, he did make some comments, recognizing that this was a slaughter in Gaza, but he didn't dispatch anybody from the Holy See to lobby Netanyahu or to protect the Christians in the West Bank and in Bethlehem and so forth. And Gaza, they didn't go that far, and so still
Christmas last year, the Pope condemned airstrikes on Gaza, saying this is cruelty. I want to say this because that touches my heart. And as a result, of course, the Vatican's ambassador to Israel was summoned to the Israeli Foreign Ministry for a conversation with the Director General. The official added the meeting between the senior Israeli official and Nuncio Adolfo Tito Iliana, the Holy See's ambassador to Israel, took place. He was, you can't describe things as they are. That's one of the things that the Israelis shy away from most of all, is any kind of accurate description of their actions in the Middle East. And the late Pope was willing to do that on occasions, though, as you say, I think he could have, but he was ailing, he was pretty ancient when it all kicked off, but he could have said and done a lot more. Yeah,
it's a shame. I think it was a major lost opportunity, but it's not the first time in history the Catholic Church has dropped the ball. World War II, just saying. So that's unfortunate, but in terms of the papal conclave, that's probably going to happen in 4 weeks or something like that. It's going to take a while. They have to have the funeral first, I think. Then they have to wait and then have the meeting. So we'll see. Will the next pope be any better on this issue? based on the short list I've seen, probably not. But anyway, I'd be pleasantly surprised if that were the case. But I wanted to share this with you as well. And, you know, we're talking about free speech, and our ability is so important, Basil, to be able to call out. And that goes for both sides. You know, I'm not calling for things that I'm offended by to be censored on X. Okay, as an example, here's a good example. This is constitutional lawyer Janine Yunus, who, by the way, you guys should be following. If you're not, she's excellent. She's a Palestinian American civil liberties free speech attorney, and she is one of the best in America. And she's lost a lot of her previous, cohort on the right over the Palestine issue. She was defending a lot of these people for other things, free speech issues regarding COVID and so forth. And a lot of them have, disengaged with her because of the fact that she's taken a principled stand on Palestine here. But she said, I'm glad these posts are permitted on Twitter X. It's much better if we know who harbors genocidal sentiments so we can make efforts to ensure that they are never in positions of power. I love her approach to this. And she goes on to say, moreover, in a few years, these people will be widely recognized as the demons that they are and will suffer the social and professional consequences for holding their monstrous views. One reason among many to embrace free speech. I absolutely love what she has said here. And look what she's pointing out, Basil. We'll bring this up here. These are the Misfit Patriot. This is a so-called conservative influencer account. He says, I'm okay with as many dead kids as it takes to stop Hamas. This is what he's put here. And the person below, named Tenacious, with the Israeli flag, gold ribbon and so forth, American flag, says, I'm with you, Misfit Patriot, _ I don't care what it takes to eliminate the threat to Israel. It could be 1 million kids. I don't care. They tweeted this on the 22nd of April. And there you are. I mean, but this sort of commentary is rife across social media. It's not being censored, of course. I personally agree with Jen Yunus, Basil. I don't want it to be censored. I want people to see it. I want to be able to oppose it. I want to be able to quote tweet it. I want to be able to criticize it and get in the comment threads and have a knockdown, drag out debate with ignorant genocidal maniacs like this guy who claims to be conservative. Okay. There's nothing conservative about wanting to carpet bomb women and children.
Well,
okay?
it's indicative of how brainwashed he is. First of all, that's the thing, because people like the Misfit Patriot, with their very limited intellect, can only formulate ideas based on the information available to them. And one of the things that the lobby in cahoots, when I say the lobby, I mean the Israeli government and its assets in the United States, including the corporate media, one of the things they've successfully been able to do is to turn Hamas into this demonic organization which threatens America directly, these scary people in these green headbands and all the rest of it. And they're the worst terrorists imaginable, so on and so forth. When, in fact, Steve Witkoff, of course, the special envoy, went to meet Hamas in Qatar when trying to get the ceasefire going again, and said, they're okay guys, they're just like us, you know. They're ordinary people.
Yeah, and that's the president. Just to be clear, so people know, Steve Witkoff is President Trump's special envoy for foreign policy. So the Trump administration engaged with direct talks with Hamas, whoever the representatives were, and that's the other thing we could talk about.
We've got to say that as soon as he said that, he was fired. You know, that was all stopped immediately.
Well, that wasn't not Witkoff was fired, but the other envoy they had.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Who he was fired when he basically said that. So yeah, it wasn't actually
dehumanization of Palestinians, and Hamas in particular, is absolutely central to the Israeli narrative that they all deserve to die And
Well,
that's why you get idiots like the so-called misguided patriot or whatever he's called.
What you're saying here, hold on. What you're saying here is very topical because there is a legal challenge in the UK, and I saw an interview recently with a barrister. His name was Frank McGuinness.
Yeah,
and it was on the Crispin Flintoff show. It was an excellent segment. He's been on McGuinness, the barrister, has been on the media. His website, they have a website called HamasCase.com. We put the URL, but this just came up in conversation, so we weren't prepared to share the URL. But they're basically, on behalf of their client, they are challenging the proscribed terrorism status for Hamas. Mainly, I haven't read all of the argument, but mainly I think the political wing as well, and that includes all of the civil service and healthcare, sanitation, whatever, civil society in Gaza, to change the terrorism status, because the argument that these barristers are making is that this is being used to quell free speech in the West, and this is also being used to allow Israel to get away with an unrestrained genocide. And it's preventing peace from happening because obviously no dialogue between the parties, and also no political dialogue in Western countries because of this terrorist designation on the political and all civil society departments of, quote, Hamas. So that's the case that's being waged. So obviously, I would say direct people to go look at this case, HamasCase.com. Look at the arguments being made. Watch some of these interviews from these barristers. It's a very interesting case, and I think it has a huge potential to be a major precedent, because what it's saying, what they're arguing, Basil, is so fundamental. Is that the government, by using the law in this way, are basically impinging on other fundamental rights of its British citizens, and there's no way that they're protecting Britain or Europe from Hamas, because Hamas is not active outside of Gaza. So it's a very interesting legal case, and we will break that down in the future. I'm going to read through their documents. Maybe we'll be lucky enough to
about what you say. You are allowed to support the case, the application, without falling foul of the law in Britain at the moment.
Exactly.
That's as far as you can go. You're allowed to make sort of
exactly. It's a very interesting case. It's worthy of a breakdown and analysis. And even I would go so far as to want to probably interview one of the barristers or one of the lawyers working on the case to get clarification on some of the details. My interest, of course, is in international law, because that's why I have my postgraduate degree in international relations. So international law being a major component of that, and how that affects foreign policy. This case is huge in that respect. So it speaks directly to the heart of what we're talking about here, and it is fundamentally a free speech issue, because if you can't even discuss the topic, this is incredible. So anyway, it's tricky. It's a tricky legal discussion. Less so in America because we have a written Bill of Rights. Britain's different story. You have a constitutional monarchy. It's based on precedent law. So it's different discussions. There's a lot more gray area in Britain on a case like this.
Well, I think the precedent that Frank McGuinness referenced is, of course, Northern Ireland.
That's right. Correct.
Which you could argue is a similar case, with two sets of people arguing over the same land, and violence committed by both sides. I mean, I think the Northern Irish troubles, frankly, were a Tea Party by comparison, and the degree of enmity between the two sides in Northern Ireland, although intense at times, it wasn't long after the Good Friday Agreement that Ian Paisley and Martin McGuinness were sitting next to each other in the newly reformed Stormont, the Northern Irish Parliament, chortling away to each other to such an extent they became known as the Chuckle Brothers. But I can't see at any point in the future Netanyahu sitting next to any kind of Palestinian official and chortling along with him in the government chamber.
I remember watching the BBC and the reports in the 90s where Jerry Adams would come on, and they had prohibited the use of his voice.
That's right. So you had to have an actor saying his words. Yeah.
You'd see him, and then it would be a voiceover of someone else talking. It was the strangest thing. But the point of that is, and I think the argument that these barristers are making, which I think is a very good argument, which is that there was a peace negotiation reached, even without full recognition of what one side believed was the proper borders of the Republic of Ireland. Okay, is almost like they reached an interim peace, and that somehow over time this thing would get figured out eventually, maybe not immediately, but in the future sometime. So that this recognition of, borders, or, the IRA's recognition of what is Northern Ireland or not, it didn't hold up the peace process. And I think that's a very important lesson. And certainly Britain should be able to derive a precedent from that when evaluating the situation with Israel and Palestine.
Yes, you would hope so. I still have a small amount of faith in the judges themselves. To look at this impartially. I mean, of course, the howling that will come from Parliament, so-called Parliament, if the judges do indeed decide to prescribe the political wing of Hamas, which incidentally was only proscribed by the ultra-Zionist Priti Patel when she was Home Secretary. And she, of course, was
2021.
So just relatively recently.
Yeah.
And she, of course, had to resign from the government for her dealings with Israel.
The military wing, Al-Qassam brigades, etc., they were proscribed right after the Terrorism Act came in 2000. So they were probably proscribed by the British government in like 2002 or something like that, post 9/11. And so, but the political wing, as you said correctly, and that's an important point, Basil, was only done recently, 2021, and the timing of that is also suspect. It's around some kind of an arms deal or aid agreement that came immediately after that, and plus the scandal. Priti Patel was in a scandal with regards to her relationship with Israel. I think she relinquished
undeclared visits.
Yeah,
she made undeclared visits. Yeah.
She lost her cabinet position, right? Was that the reason?
Yeah.
So that should be looked at again. I think it's only fair. But we'll bring this, and we'll probably end with this, Basil. But it's important to get this vantage point. This is from Jewish Voices for Peace. Okay. This is their website here. I don't know if everybody can get a good look at that on screen. And obviously, you've followed all of these, organizations, Basil. I know you've also interviewed umpteen number of these people from these different organizations. And this is their statement on the issue, our approach to Zionism. And I'll read this because to me, it's very interesting. Ostensibly, this is a left-wing group, okay, in the Western political context. They said, Jewish Voices for Peace is guided by a vision of justice, equality, and freedom for all people. We unequivocally oppose Zionism because it counters all of these ideals. And they go on saying, we know that opposing Zionism or even discussing it can be painful, can strike at the deepest trauma and greatest fears of many of us. Zionism is a 19th century political ideology that emerged in a moment where Jews were defined as irrevocably outside of Christian Europe. European anti-Semitism threatened and ended millions of Jewish lives in pogroms, in exile, and in the Holocaust. Through study and action, through deep relationships with Palestinians fighting for their own liberation Okay, this is a Jewish group. Let me just remind people. And through their own understanding of Jewish safety and self-determination, we have come to see that Zionism was a false and failed answer to the desperately real question many of our ancestors faced of how to protect Jewish lives from murderous anti-Semitism in Europe. And while it had many strains historically, the Zionism that took hold and stands today is a settler colonial movement. Okay, this is a Jewish group stating, this is their basically mission statement here, and establishing an apartheid state where Jews have more rights than others. Our own history teaches us how dangerous this can be. And I could go on. This is actually a really interesting statement, and it's one of the more balanced, well thought out.
Can you tell everybody when this was published? Is this dated at all?
This was published. Let me see if they've dated this or not. This is on their website. Okay, Jewish Voices for Peace. So
no, it doesn't really, because I think they may have revised their position. I think like Peter Beinart and other notable.
That's on there right now. That's live right now on their website.
They were Zionist. I think they were Zionist. I think
previously, yes,
they were in favor of a so-called state solution and everything. Previously, I think that this position may have changed in the last few months.
Yeah. So this is
new. It's unusual for any Jewish. Yeah, they used to have funding from a lot of wealthy Jewish people for them to stay quite open. That's an apartheid state. I mean, that represents a sea change, And so you believe this was published recently?
Yeah, absolutely. This is live on their front page of their website right now. This is a major Jewish peace organization, very active in America. Also, I've seen them.
Of course, in the United Kingdom, we've just had 36 members of the Board of Deputies of British Jews sign an open letter saying they felt that Israel had gone a bit too far with its evisceration of the Palestinian people, and they are now being disciplined by the majority of the Board of Deputies. Oh yes, people who hold office are being suspended, and there's going to be an inquiry into all this.
Wow. So yeah, this is their website, Jewish Voices for Peace. You can go ahead and check them out. There's some interesting posts on here as well. Definitely a leftist organization, and Jewish as well. Anyway, it's important.
At the forefront of a lot of the protests, the anti-genocide protests in New York, particularly, where they're very strong amongst younger Jewish people, of course, increasing numbers of whom do reject Zionism. And note that sign somebody's holding up there: Zionism does not equal Judaism. But the Trump administration think they know better.
That's right. Yep.
So we have now a situation where Gentiles, I mean, this has been the case. This was the case Labour Party during Jewish people for anti-Semitism. So square that circle for us, Patrick.
Impossible to square that circle, Mr. Basil Valentine. And again, if we didn't shake you to the core, we'll do it once again. Again, ladies and gentlemen, brace yourself. We're about to put a disturbing image on screen just to get an emotional reaction from people. And again, we're warning you, this is a disturbing image. This is a 17 parental guidance. And here it is, folks, right there. Right there. We just thought we'd flash that up on screen again to show you how edgy and dangerous this program really is. That's Douglas Murray and Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, September 27th, 2024. I guess at a Netanyahu speech. That must have been a fun event to attend. So sorry we missed that one. There they are. So that's how it goes. This is how the lobby runs. And yeah, it's all about apparently democracies and death cults. So I guess the country that's on trial for genocide with its leaders indicted by the International Criminal Court, Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, I guess that's not a death cult, I guess. What do you think? Anyway, someone should write a best-selling book about that.
What I think, Patrick.
So anyway, there it is, the Zionist woke right. They want to cancel everybody. Deport, cancel, shut down, arrest, get fired, running university presidents out of their jobs in Ivy League schools. It's absolutely incredible.
I saw Aaron Mate and Katie Halper, two anti-Zionist Jews, appear to have been doxxed in the last few hours. I'm not quite sure of the details of how they've been attacked just yet. But that Betar group, I mean, this is how it becomes a circular firing squad. The fascist Zionist group, they started compiling lists of Jewish people who should not be ever allowed into Israel, which is interesting.
I know. Well, you can sort of rule yourself out. Just go to Lebanon or Syria, I guess. Once you have that stamp in your passport, you're not going to get in anyway. I
think it's after the two British MPs were denied access, something that produced a sort of short, pretty meaningless milquetoast flurry of protest in Parliament. More recently, I think 27 French lawmakers have been denied access to Israel as well. They really do seem determined to isolate themselves from the rest of the world, even as, of course, thousands of Israelis are moving to places like Greece and Cyprus, buying properties in neighboring countries, it appears.
Yeah, and these one of those other students, leaders from Colombia, I think his name is Moshin. He's Palestinian. He was also apprehended by ICE, and they wanted to deport him. Turns out he's the Student Buddhist Society leader at Columbia. So a Palestinian Buddhist Trump is trying to deport. And meanwhile, the New York Post is running stories like this. Of course, this is just a classic right here. American Jews face a record 25 anti-Semitic incidents per day last year, more than one per hour. The most related to hatred of Israel. Starting point. So that's the New York Post running these sort of things. So again, it's the expansion of the definition of anti-Semitism, the ever-expanding arbitrary definition that nobody can keep track of because they keep changing it, that includes any criticism of Israel, which they call hatred of Israel. So this is a state, a political body, a state that apparently you can't, if you disagree with their policies or the fact they're involved in killing, tens of thousands of women and children, that is supposedly hateful thoughts, according to the New York Post here.
Apparently saying Free Palestine counts as an anti-Semitic incident, these days. So,
yeah. So what kind of society are we living in that where this is how we're going to be policing thought and speech? It's utterly ridiculous. This is just getting way out of hand. And in the U.S., this is going to end up in the Supreme Court. And again, to conservatives and members of the Zionist woke right, you don't want to die on the hill of free speech. Trust me, that's the wrong hill to die on if you really are conservative.
The hill of opposing free speech, Patrick.
Yeah, no, exactly. The hill of opposing free speech. Yeah, no, you're going to die. No, it's the victorious hill that you'll be slayed on by true libertarians and people who love their First Amendment. Okay, so it's not going to end well. So you might get a few W's initially here by using the executive branch and Marco Rubio and who else? Mark Levine, this hot air balloon machine from Fox, has been appointed by Trump to the cabinet as a anti-Semitic police official to police anti-Semitic we'll find wherever it is. You know, we're going to find it. Mark Levine's on the case. Again, another Fox News presenter appointed by Trump to another vestigial cabinet position. I mean, this is just getting ridiculous. So the problem is here, Basil, is the left aren't really pushing back on this because they're all bought and paid for, as well as the right. Everybody is bought.
What you mean by the left?
Democrats.
Looking at the United States, there isn't
Democrats.
There isn't a meaningful left. Yeah. I mean, they're all Zionists as well, with a few tiny number of exceptions. But AOC, who incidentally is being lined up for a possible presidential run in a few years' time,
definitely
after her tour with Bernie Sanders, her so-called anti-oligarchy tour, where protesters unveiled the Palestinian flag during Bernie's speech. I don't know if you saw that, and he was drowned out by a raucous chorus of "Free Palestine." But he had
thrown out, wasn't he?
Well, the people that unveiled the flag were thrown out and arrested.
Yeah. Again, so the left are crushing free speech, or the Democrats as well as the Republicans. I won't even call them conservative as well. Like you said, Basil, it's equally as bad of a misnomer as the left in America. There's nothing conservative about being a neocon. A neocon is a Trotskyite that is cross-dressing. It's a trans conservative. That's what a neocon is. You're a trans conservative. Douglas Murray is a trans conservative. Trans conservative. Ben Shapiro, trans conservative. They're all trans conservatives. They're neocons who are basically Trotskyites, okay? Radical Trotskyites who are masquerading and cross-dressing to look like they are actual conservatives, and you can tell by the policies that they back and the sort of rhetoric that they espouse. It's kind of obvious at this point. But anyway, U.S. politics, Basil, is absolutely insane. Nothing means anything anymore, but power reigns supreme nonetheless. Basil Valentine, if you haven't already checked out his work, is the political editor at this excellent outlet, The Pulse.today. Basil, tell us when people can watch and listen to your great political takes and timeless wisdom.
Well, we're in the midst of a bit of a shake-up at The Pulse, so I honestly can't tell you, but do please go along there, and you'll find me there from time to time. And all will be revealed. All will be revealed. I'm going to be live again, I hope, from next week.
Yeah, you've got your show archive as well. For people that want to subscribe, you can get access to, the archives there. Basil Valentine, obviously one of the better political commentators out there. I'd say probably one of the best, if not the best, in the British Isles.
Thank
Not
you
trying
for saying
to inflate your reputation. It needs no inflating. It is what it is. You've always been pretty much on the money, Basil, on everything.
Thank you.
So, but being right is you don't get any rewards or medals for being right. You tend to get a lot of flack, don't you, when you're over the target like that. But do follow Basil Valentine. Obviously, he's been a great part of 21st Century Wire and the Sunday Wire show for many years. You also find him on our Sunday program. He joins in on the Overdrive segment some weeks as well, so you can see him there on the Sunday Wire. That's every Sunday. That's 12 p.m. till 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 5 till 8 UK time. That is my show. That's been going for over 10 years, 12 years actually, to be accurate. We're in our 12th year, believe it or not. I mean, gosh. I know.
I was a young man when it started.
Whippersnappers. We all were, weren't we? Anyway, Basil Valentine, again, at the Pulse.today. Fantastic political pundit, political editor there. Keeping things on the straight and narrow is Mr. Valentine. Appreciate you bringing a rounded perspective to the conversation. There he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That is Mr. Valentine. And again, I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. It's been absolutely a pleasure hosting you today. Kind of an interesting discussion. Obviously, a lot of different angles there. We didn't get to everything that we wanted to, but there's other opportunities to pick up where we left off on this. So again, we appreciate you joining us, and we will see you when we see you, probably this Sunday. Tune into 21stcenturywire.com for the Sunday Wire, but also check us out on our website, 21stcenturywire.com. Look at the ticker along the bottom there. Go to 21stcenturywire.com for the latest updates on international news and geopolitical analysis. Follow us there. And again, on X, Twitter, at 21Wire. You'll find us also on YouTube, on Rumble. And hello to everybody on the different streams watching us, and appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time. All the best.